In this video, I will discuss the incident of mercury poisoning that originated in Minamata Bay, Japan, resulting from water contamination by a local factory. The objectives of this video are to provide background on the region and its people at the time of the outbreak, describe the timeline of events starting from the first case of mercury poisoning to the investigation that led to the discovery of the source of the outbreak, explain the environmental impact of the event both before and after decontamination efforts, explain the long-term health effects of mercury poisoning and the prevalence of the disease today, and describe the legacy of the event and its impact globally. The table of contents includes history of the region and its people, timeline of events, environmental impact of mercury contamination, decontamination of the affected regions and other preventative measures, health effects of mercury poisoning and prevalence of disease, legacy and impact of Minamata Bay, summary and references. Minamata Bay is a small inlet located on the southwestern coast of Kyushu Island, Japan. The bay, part of the larger Shiranui Sea, is located between the coast of the Kyushu mainland and the offlying islands of Kumamoto and Nagasaki prefectures. Due to its easy access and abundance of fish and shellfish, it has been a natural harbor for fishermen for many centuries. Starting in 1932, the Chiso factory, a chemical factory located along the Minamata Bay, began production of acetaldehyde, a main ingredient in the production of plastic. Production soared in the post-war years, and by the late 1950s and 1960s, Chiso was regarded as the driving force behind the local economy. The first case of mercury poisoning, which would later be renamed Minamata disease, was first officially recorded on May 1, 1956, after a pediatrician at Chiso Hospital examined two young sisters from a fishing village on Minamata Bay who presented with peculiar neurological symptoms. On May 8, 1956, a newspaper in the Kyushu area first reported on the disease. After that, numerous cases were reported in which individuals complained of similar neurological symptoms such as loss of sensation and the numbness in the hands and feet, and ability to grasp small objects and unsteady gait. In addition, many complained of difficulty seeing, hearing, and swallowing. In general, these symptoms deteriorated and were followed by convulsions, coma, and in many cases, death. In August 1956, in response to the outbreak, Kumamoto University School of Medicine formed a research group to determine the cause. Results of one of these studies, which can be seen in this table, revealed an association between the family occupation of fishing and the disease, as individuals belonging to households where the main occupation was fishing were 16.5 times more likely to acquire the disease. Results can also be seen in this pie chart, which shows that 55% of patients came from houses where fishing was the primary occupation. In November 1956, the research group concluded that the disease was due to food poisoning caused by the consumption of contaminated fish from the bay. However, at the time, the Public Health Bureau did not believe this was sufficient evidence and therefore placed no restrictions on fishing in the area. As a result, contamination continued and, as the industry expanded, spread along the entire coast of the Shiranui Sea. In further investigations, researchers extracted elevated levels of mercury from victims' organs at autopsy and large quantities of mercury from mud and shellfish in the bay. They also succeeded in inducing similar neurological symptoms in cats by feeding them methyl mercury. Subsequently, on October 12, 1959, methyl mercury was recognized as the etiological agent. However, the government rejected this explanation because only mercury and not methyl mercury had been found. In 1960, further evidence of the cause of the disease was found when Kumamoto Prefecture Institute of Health Research investigated the mercury concentration in hair samples of 1,694 healthy fishermen from around the Shiranui Sea. Researchers found elevated mercury levels in the hair samples, suggesting that the contamination had spread throughout the entire Shiranui Sea. For example, mercury levels in Goshinora on the other side of the Shiranui Sea were about 10 times higher than those in residents of the non-exposed city of Kumamoto. In 1962, they succeeded in confirming the cause of the disease when they extracted methylmercury chloride from the sludge of an acetaldehyde production process at the Chiso factory. Their research showed that methylmercury, a byproduct in acetaldehyde production, had been discharged from the factory, a process which can be seen in this image. In 1964, methylmercury food poisoning occurred in Niigata, another fishing village located along Japan's coast, leading to what is now called Niigata-Minamata disease. In 1968, after a case relating to Niigata-Minamata disease went on trial, the Japanese government officially endorsed the causal relationship between the wastewater from the factory in Minamata and Minamata disease. By this time, methylmercury production had already stopped since it became unnecessary for the factory to produce acetaldehyde. 12 years had passed since the etiological agent was identified and confirmed. During this period, the residents continued to eat contaminated fish without any effective preventative measures in place, and the exposure not only spread to those in Minamata Bay, but also to those along the entire coast of the Shiranui Sea. After confirmation that methylmercury was the cause of poisoning, more investigational studies were carried out to measure concentrations of mercury in the affected areas. Between 1975 and 1988, Researchers collected 268 samples from the Yatsushiro Sea and analyzed them to measure the total mercury concentration and the total amount of mercury in the surface sediments. As seen in this line graph, between 1975 and 1984, except for in 1982, there was a sharp increase in mercury levels, reaching its peak in 1984. This sudden decrease in mercury concentration seen in 1982 was attributed to the historic rainfall that occurred 1 month prior to sampling, which had reduced mercury concentrations in the surface sediments. Since 1985, there has been a dramatic reduction in the total amount of mercury, decreasing to 24.04 tons in 1988. This decrease can be largely attributed to the decontamination project that was initiated in Minamata Bay in 1984. In 1984, a decontamination project was initiated at the bay. Between 1984 and 1993, the decontamination project involved carefully dredging the contaminated sediments. The contaminated sediments were stored inside a concrete wall, and the excess water from the sediments was treated before re-releasing it into the bay. In addition to decontamination, several other measures were taken to prevent mercury poisoning and the spread of contamination. In 1974, the Kumamoto Prefecture began construction of dividing nets, which would close off the mouth of the bay and prevent the spread of contaminated fish. In addition, in April 1975 to March of 1990, during the implementation of preventative measures, the Minamata Fisheries Co-op prohibited fishing in Minamata Bay. The bay was officially declared safe in 1997. While symptoms varied from acute to chronic, the effects of Minamata disease were serious and long-lasting, commonly leading to permanent disability and death. In 1962, it was established that methylmercury led to fetal poisoning, causing infants to be born with intellectual impairment, persistence of primitive reflexes, cerebellar signs, and delayed physical development. Today, it is estimated that more than 900 people died from contamination. However, the exact number is unknown. As of April 2020, 2,283 patients were officially recognized as having Minamata disease. However, it is estimated that thousands more suffer from this disease. To date, the contamination at Minamata is considered one of the most catastrophic incidences of industrial pollution the world has ever seen. As a result of this tragedy, in January 2013, an international treaty known as the Minamata Convention on Mercury was established by the UN to protect human health and the environment from anthropogenic emissions and releases of mercury. In January 1993, the Minamata Disease Municipal Museum was established to educate people about the event and pay tribute to those who suffered. In summary, between 1932 and 1968, the Chiso Corporation, a local petrochemical factory, dumped an estimated 27 tons of mercury into Minamata Bay, poisoning fish and eventually the people who ate them. Although the etiological agent was discovered as early as 1956, because the government did not endorse it, contamination continued and the disease spread throughout the later 1950s and 1960s. The effects of this event were devastating, as it estimated that over 900 people died from the disease, and as of April 2020, 2,283 patients were officially recognized as having the disease. However, it is estimated that there are thousands of individuals that are currently affected who exhibit such neurological signs. Since the causal relationship was acknowledged, decontamination and other public health measures have been implemented to prevent an event like this from happening again. In 1977, the bay was cleared safe to catch and eat fish. These are my references.